Binswanger, the HB in HBTV. I'm a philosopher who advocates Ayn Rand's philosophy of objectivism. Today we're continuing, and for several sessions, we have been and will be continuing on a central topic of Ayn Rand's philosophy, man as a being of volitional consciousness. That is the topic of free will. Last time I showed that Sam Harris's determinism is both self-refuting and false to the facts of introspection. Those of you who attended remember my examples, for instance, of the two students deciding the night before an exam whether to study for the exam or go to a movie. This was a beginning of a vast subject that I think dissolves the whole problem of free will versus determinism. That is, you need to understand how free will operates. That's why I've called today the mechanics of free will. It isn't mechanics, but that's a good metaphor. And once you see what it is you do inside that constitutes your free choice, it becomes unmistakable, and the theoretical objections to it posed by Harris and others just go, they dissolve, they disappear. Then it's not like they really need to be answered. The answer lies in understanding what you can introspect about the way your mind works. Now, interestingly, this is uncharted territory. That is, almost no one discusses any of the facts and principles that I'm going to be mentioning and calling to your attention. Ayn Rand made the basic identifications here. I'm fleshing them out with my own introspective reports, and it's not like I have to, commune with my inner self. And these are obvious things that we all know, but nobody has ever brought them to light in philosophy. It's like there was a philosophy that said there can't be apple trees. And apple trees are out there all around us, but no one has said, hey, wait a minute, that's an apple tree. So I have the feeling I'm overselling the content of this lecture, but to me, or this session, to me, this is the subject matter that is so personally important to each of us and is so recognizable that it reframes the whole debate at minimum and just dissolves the determinist position at maximum. So what am I talking about? What is the context here? The determinists point out that your actions occur because of what your mind does. You think you have a free choice, but you don't. You act in the way you decide to act, and you decide to act on the basis of the content of your mind. You remember that Sam Harris, if you were here, you remember, Sam Harris said, and I quote, "A moment or two of serious self-scrutiny, and you might observe that you no more decide the next thought you think than the next thought I write." Am I free to do that which does not occur to me to do? Of course not. Yes, you are. It takes some explanation. The first part is right. You do not decide the content of the next thought that occurs to you. You do not decide it directly, but you're in control of it. And he his determinism and that of everybody else who is a determinist is based on the assumption that your brain puts certain content into your conscious awareness, and it's on the basis of that content that you do what you do. So since that content is supplied to you, things pop into your mind without your choosing it, you are not in control of your actions. There's that quote from Lawrence of Arabia, I think, which is, you can do what you want to do, but you can't want what you want to want. And doing what you want to do when you're not in control of your wants is not freedom. It can be political freedom if no one stops you, but it is not free will. It is not metaphysical freedom. It is not what we are concerned with. It does not give rise to morality or any normative approach to anything. It's whatever happens, happens. That's the determinist position. You can't evaluate it. Just like the weather. The weather happens and, it rains and, it shouldn't rain. It's immoral for raining. No. Rain is necessary given the conditions. If your actions are necessary given your mental content, then you are not responsible. You are raining on your own parade. You are as unaccountable, as amoral, as non-judgable as rainfall or the orbits of the planets. Some people think it's sufficient to say, but look, man does many more complicated things that are many more complicated, many times more complicated than raining or not raining. Man is very flexible. He has a wide range of behavior. Yeah, but that doesn't matter because that's like saying, well, the weather is very nuanced and subtle. You can't just say rain is rain, and it can snow, and can sleet, and the wind can blow. So what? So man acts in more complicated ways. A computer acts in more complicated ways, but is it determined? Yeah, the inputs and the programming, which is reflected in the wiring, creates the output. I remember when I got into the work I did as an intern in physiological psychology, I had to use an adding machine to take averages of data. So I ran little experiments, had to add up lots of numbers and take an average. An adding machine is a physical thing that's operated either by hand crank or by electric. This one was electric. You pushed the divide button after you'd entered all the numbers, and you would hear ka-chaka, chaka, 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 chaka for about 15 seconds before the answer would pop up. But the adding machine is a physical device, and it was not exercising free will. It wasn't deliberating. It just takes some time for processes to occur. So the mere fact that we are not knee-jerk reflex responders doesn't show anything. Maybe it just takes a long time for a man to process all his inputs or to be processed by all his inputs. That's what a determinist would say. So there are all kinds of bad arguments based upon observation and introspection. Sure, that's good, but they don't establish what the free willist wants to establish and should be able to establish. So let's get into it. The content of awareness is not the only factor determining what decision you reach and therefore what action you take. There's also whether you are active or passive. And that is where your free will lies. You are not the helpless victim of what your subconscious or your brain, whichever you call it, pops into your mind. You can have an active mental set where you're trying to find out the answer to a question, or you can be a passive rider, R-I-D-E-R, passenger, in your own mental equipment. Activity is a kind of vague word. You can be active or passive. What do I mean by active? Well, let's look at levels of awareness. Now, that's a term you will find in objectivism and is not discussed elsewhere, as far as I know. It should be unfamiliar to you, but it's an obvious concept. When I used to teach college undergraduates, I could observe them just looking at them, that they were on various levels, different levels of awareness. I've had students actually fall asleep. That's barely aware. We know there's something going on in there because if you make a loud noise, they wake up. So they're either aware or on some little level or prepared to be aware when some stimulus hits them. But a lot of the students were on just a little higher level of awareness in regard to the lecture. They weren't asleep, but they didn't understand even the words I was saying. They were either about to fall asleep or thinking about something else. And my voice is just a sound. You know how that is when you're, say, at a lecture or the TV is on, but you're completely spaced out and you don't even hear the meaning of the words. It's just yada, 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 as far as you're concerned. Now, it may be that it's that way because you're concentrating very hard on something else. But I'm talking about in regard to my lecture. I'm sort of lecture-centric here, speaker-centric. In regard to my lecture, these students are on a very low level of awareness, practically on the animal level. Another segment is on a somewhat higher level of awareness, but still low. They're the ones who hear the words, and if you ask them, what did he just say? They could repeat the words. You know how the perennial argument between husband and wife, you're not listening. Yes, you said I need the car tomorrow. Yeah, you can repeat the words, but you weren't paying any attention. And that's true of a lot of students. They are not in the yada yada stage, but they're not thinking about it. They're not active. They're taking it in just slightly above the animal level. Now let's take a big jump to a kind of middle level of awareness. This is probably the average student. He hears you, he understands, yeah, he's talking about free will, he's talking about a level of awareness, he's making differences, he's talking about his students, he's being colorful. And what do you think the meaning was? You ask. What was that all about? Why was he doing that? Well, he was on free will. Yeah, but what was the specific sub goal place in the discussion that he was at? Why was he saying what he was saying? Now, the answer in this case is he was trying to point out the mechanics of free will so you could recognize it and see that Sam Harris and the determinists are wrong. And the specific thing was a discussion of levels of awareness because you can be active or passive in regard to the levels. But To be on that level of awareness, you have to be way above the previous level that I just described. So that's like almost there at the jackpot. Almost there is a good student who's following what the teacher's saying, who knows why the subject's being discussed, maybe taking notes, trying to follow it, understanding, nodding or whatever. And that he's like 80% of the way there. But the top level is the person who's on the highest level of awareness. Now, again, I'm saying in regard to my lecture, maybe he shouldn't be on the highest level of awareness with regard to my lecture. Maybe there's something going on in his life. He should be tuning me out, but assume that's not the case. I'm talking about in regard to my lecture. The highest level is he's hearing it, he's understanding the meaning, he sees where I'm going with it, and he judges it. He says, yeah, that's right. Or no, that's not right, because there's something off about this description. There's something doesn't fit with so-and-so. Wait, maybe he's going to cover that. But he's active, he's judging, he's thinking, he's saying, yeah, this sounds right, but how does that fit into moral responsibility? Maybe he's going to cover that. So the fully aware student at a lecture, fully aware of the lecture, is the one who's using all his mental resources to think about, understand, and judge the validity or invalidity of what is being said. Now, at any given time, you can find students on all these levels of awareness. If you've got more than 10 students in the class, and more than that, students, you can, kind of observe them. You say something really interesting, or you stop. That's an attention grabber. And suddenly students who had been doing this, putting the head, look up. So students are going in and out of different levels of awareness. Some of them are on the highest level and stay there. Some of them are on the lowest level and stay there. But most of them are kind of flitting back and forth, oscillating among different levels. Now, it's not an issue of intelligence that we're talking about. Even the smartest, most brilliant student has the power to tune me out. Whether just to veg out or to think about something that's more interesting to him. And even the slowest, least intelligent student has the power to ask himself questions. What does he mean? I don't get this. Part of the judging, it just occurred to me to add, part of the judging is judging how well you're doing. For instance, I don't get this. I'm confused. I don't follow. Or, yeah, that's clear. Yeah, I'm getting this. Yeah, I think that's true. Yes, this is good. So it's either positive or negative. Makes sense, fits with the rest of my knowledge, or, it contradicts so-and-so. And the process of paying attention to your own cognitive processes, what they call metacognition today, an appropriate term, is an essential part of having an active mind. Now, I've been avoiding the one term that objectivism uses to name the issue of selecting your level of awareness, and that's the term focus. Mental focus, intellectual focus. A mind can be, in Ayn Rand's terms, in focus or out of focus. I'm throwing a lot of material. See, I'm monitoring now how I think this is going. I'm throwing a lot of material out there. I don't know whether it's landing the way I hope it lands because I can't see you. This is one way. So maybe it'd be a good time to back up and kind of, now using the term focus, recast everything to just make it simple. The determinists say what's in your mind governs what you do. And there's a certain kind of plausibility, but you have a choice of being in focus or out of focus. And that affects what gets into your mind and what happens to what gets into your mind. The same idea popping into your mind will lead to one action if you're on a high level of awareness in full focus, and a completely different, or it could, completely different action if it comes in and you're out of focus. What does it mean to be in focus or out of focus? Well, in focus means you're committed to doing everything you need to do in order to understand what you're dealing with. It's a commitment. It's a commitment to full awareness of reality in any issue that you're dealing with. To be out of focus means you abandon that. You let go. You're a passenger in your own mind. You probably have watched YouTube where it's set up that after a video is ended, it tries to guess at what you will like. It puts up a bunch of suggestions. And if you don't do anything, the next video will start. Well, that's the way some people live their lives. And they are the ones that Harris is taking as representative of everybody in the human race. You don't choose the video, it just queued up. Maybe YouTube has an algorithm that somehow knows what you are enjoying and what you're not. We could imagine that it is looking at the pupils of your eyes and seeing when they enlarge, which is a sign of interest. It doesn't, but it could. If you have a camera on your computer while you're watching YouTube. But the next one will come, right? And you just sit there vegged out looking at it. But you have a choice. And this would be to be in focus. You watch and you judge what you're hearing. You're saying, oh, this is crap. This is obviously ridiculous stuff. This is BS. Let me go to something else. And you're not limited, as Harris thinks you are, to what's there. First of all, it's not just, oh, this came in, and then this came in, and then this came in into your mind, right? There are things on the periphery, like, this is confusing, but maybe you don't identify it. It begins just as a bad feeling about what you're listening to. It amounts to, huh? Now, that's an automatic reaction, a metacognitive reaction, a cognitive signal or feeling or sense about how things are going in here, in the brain, in the mind. But you don't have to pay attention to that. If you're in focus, you know what's going on, you answer the signals, and when you get a huh, you say, what's the problem here? Oh, I don't know what he means by If it's me, maybe you don't know what he means by levels of awareness. Or what does it mean by awareness? So to be in focus means not only that you are thinking and judging the material, but you're judging how you're processing the material. I'm getting this is clear. Help, I want more. Or, huh? Oh, I'm confused. This is is it me or is it him? It's him. He hasn't defined any terms. It seems to be illogically organized. I can't follow this. It's subjective. So to be in focus means that you're committed to understanding the world, and that means some attention given to your instrument for knowing the world, making sure that it's pointed at the right thing and so forth. And it means you use the search function. You do not just sit there and wait for one video to end and another one to begin. So you go to the little magnifying glass of the search on YouTube and you put in the next thing you want to look at, which is generally sparked by the preceding thing you're looking at. So you're watching Sam Harris talk about free will, and something he says reminds you of an argument about causality. I hate to take abstract examples. No, let's not take an abstract. Let's take a more concrete example, because I have some examples of how different mental sets create different mental actions, different mental content, different decisions, and therefore different physical actions. It occurs to you, and you do not choose this thought, but something triggers it and occurs to you, I need a bigger TV. I haven't bought a new TV in 10 years, and I don't have to have a 50-inch TV. I can now afford a 65-inch TV, and that would be better. Okay, if you're out of focus, then that thought pops into your mind and you say, yeah, that would be good. I'm going to go, and you get in your car and drive to Best Buy and buy it. If you're in focus, you ask yourself a series of questions. Well, what are exactly the prices now? What is the best brand? What else might I spend the money on? Oh, I'm getting my car repaired. Do I really have enough, or don't I could get a transmission overhaul for my car and it's been acting up? Which would I prefer? Well, what does it actually entail to get my transmission overhauled? I have to leave it in the shop for like 2 weeks. I won't have a car. But isn't a transmission an essential? I mean, you can't, it's not like the seat covers are dirty. It's making a clunking sound, and you're worried that it's going to just seize up and stop operating. But then I would like a bigger TV. Well, which is essential? Which matters more? Having a running car or having a bigger TV? I think the car. But not necessarily, for somebody else, it might be the TV. I'm stuck here at home due to COVID or whatever. So the active person is asking themselves a whole bunch of questions. That's what thinking is. Ayn Rand's first description of her theory of free will that I read this description in a previous episode. It's the choice to think or not to think. And the choice to think means the choice to ask questions. So in our analogy of YouTube, it's the choice to search. So you're watching one video, something comes up, and you think, I don't understand that. I better search for a video explaining that part, because this video presupposes I know that part. So you go and you search, and then you get certain things back, and you scan what comes back. You say, this looks good, this looks good. This looks like really good. Oh, yes, I know that guy, that lecturer, that YouTuber. I'm going to look at this one. And then you look at it, and if you're in focus, you're judging it when you go, well, this isn't as good as I thought. Let me go back and search. Let me refine my search. So what comes into your mind is determined both by your past experiences that you've got things stored for, and whether you're questioning, thinking, asking and answering queries. It's radically different if you just sit there on autopilot and YouTube video, you watch one after the other as it feeds them to you. Yet that's the way the determinists view man. Things pop into your mind and they come with a certain emotional urge for action. And if it's big enough, you act. Yeah, that's a mind out of focus. That's a mind that has dropped the controls, but you have the power to say, what's going on here? I'm just sitting here vegged out, letting YouTube tell me what I want to watch. But, my life's important. My time's important. What would it really be of value? I entered this for a reason. I wanted to find out if I could see an excerpt from an old TV series, say Gunsmoke, because I'm interested in that. And I wanted to compare it to what I see on TV today, or whatever purpose you have. You have a purpose if you're in focus. And when you play it, you're judging it in terms of that purpose. Well, I see this is really not as good as I thought it would be, or this is a lot better than I thought it would be, or this is about as I thought it would be. But I need to find out, I don't know what it is. So now I'm going to search for, and according to that, things will come up. I'll pick one and I'll watch that, but I'm judging while I'm watching that. So the process of reaching a decision rationally in focus is completely the opposite of just letting things wash over you. And once the motivational level, the emotional urge gets to a certain point, you get up out of your seat. Unfortunately, that's the way a lot of people decide. Now let's take it for something a lot more interesting than should I buy a new TV, or what do I think of Gunsmoke? Vaccines. There are these two sides. I got something in email today saying that there are new revelations about the vaccines, and they're all summed up in this video. Watch this video. I got this from a friend of mine. And there are these two sides, the pro-vaccine and the anti-vaccine. A lot of people on each side are just letting things wash over them. So somebody sends them a link. Oh, look, here's the lowdown on the vaccines, on how people are getting these bad reactions, and we should all be taking ivermectin, is it? And instead of getting vaccinated, and if you're under 80, you don't need it anyway. And you watch it, and if you're out of focus, often a very good, seemingly good case is made, and you sit there nodding, yeah. And then your buddies bring it up, and you quote from this guy pointed out that X. Or if you're on the other side and say, everybody has to have the vaccine, and they're threatening the people who don't have the vaccine because the vaccine isn't perfect. So the unvaccinated pose a certain risk to the vaccinated. Granted, it's less of a risk. I just saw a YouTube video on it where it was statistics were given showing, there's a curve, and vaccine is 10 times, vaccinated people are 10 times less likely to get it and 1,000 times less likely to die from. Well, yeah, but were you mentally active? Do you know that, or did you just see a bunch of graphs from you don't know where that confirmed your existing predilection? So what does an in-focus person do? He challenges what he's seeing. On either side, whether it's in agreement with him or not, he says, well, wait a minute. Who is this guy who's talking, and what are his credentials? He's a machinist from Tuskegee, Alabama? Or on the other side, oh, he works for the National Institutes of Health? He works for CDC? Well, what do I think of the CDC? I mean, they were wrong about it. I think they were wrong. Let me Google it. Oh, I see this, and now I have to judge this statement. Who's this guy's credentials? What are they? And what is the counter argument? What does the other side say? That you never see, right? You never see a guy who's anti-vax saying, I went to the best anti-vax, the best pro-vax sites. I looked at the statistics, I thought about them, and I think they're just wrong. And I think I'm qualified to make that judgment because I studied statistics for 2 years at Cornell, and no, it's, and the same on the other side, the ones who say, no, the graphs show this and that's it. They don't go read the anti-vax propaganda. Some do, I do, but typically it's an echo chamber. There's a reason that term has become a trope, right? People just get reinforcement, good feelings about what they already believe, what their tribe believes, so they can cluck over it and say at coffee with their friends the next morning, do you know what Biden said now about the vaccines? Or on the other side, do you know what those anti-vaxxers are now claiming? And make yourself feel good because you watched a video or went to a website which you didn't judge critically. So you get the point, there's nothing wrong with the way do you know what Biden did now, or do you know what this anti-vax? That can be completely correct to do, but only if you're thinking, only if you went to these sites in focus with a critical judgment. Does this make sense? What are his grounds and what are his credentials for saying this? And I'm not on the side of, traditional credentials. The fact that a guy has a PhD from Harvard in climate science maybe disqualifies him from being relied upon in relation to climate science. Maybe. It certainly doesn't end the argument. But if you got two people talking about the messenger RNA vaccines, and one of them is a biochemist with, let's take a neutral place, a biochemist at MIT who has patented his own discoveries, has got a good record. And the other guy is a veterinarian in Waterloo Falls, New York. And he has, he's got the knowledge he picked up from surfing the web. That is something that establishes who should be taken as an expert witness on these things. But what's the moral is not about how to look at the issue of vaccination, or whether to buy a new TV. It's just like, isn't it blindingly clear that you could be active, in focus, rational, or in a cognitive daze, in a stupor, reacting emotionally without asking whether you really get it or whether the information is reliable. I mean, that is so easy to get in touch with. There are things I have really thought through. I've considered the possibility that there's counter evidence, looked into it, there wasn't. And then there's stuff, oh yeah, I've always accepted that, like Jonah was swallowed by the whale. Yeah. Well, it's in the Bible. I mean, we're very familiar with this passive mental set that goes along with what jumps into the brain, jumps from the brain into consciousness, actually. And how someone like Sam Harris, who's a smart guy, could write as if you're just a writer with your mouth open as the images and stuff comes by. I don't know. How does he do that? How does he ignore? Well, I know in one sense. All the material I've been giving to you is based upon objectivism. And it's only Ayn Rand who has talked about levels of awareness, mental activity, thinking as questioning and answering, judging what comes in, having a cognitive purpose, setting your mind to full awareness of reality. I mean, who even believes in reality today other than objectivists? So there's one more point that I have to get in today in this episode, and that is you not only judge, if you're rational and in focus, you not only judge what comes into your mind, you file it logically. So, for instance, you decide about the big screen TV, the bigger TV, and you decide fixing your car is more important. You did it on the basis of an identification that bigger image is pleasant, but having a car that works is an essential. It's not, oh yeah, I like it better when my car runs than when it doesn't. You know, it's all right when it doesn't run, but when it runs, it's better. It's like having a bigger TV. No, you have to get places. Well, today we got Uber, so you just don't want to spend the money on Uber and have the wait. So you identify, one's an issue of improving an aesthetic experience slightly, and the other is an essential of your life. And if you bring that fact that I just stated, essential, non-essential, into full conscious awareness, it will get filed in your brain in that way. If you make logical identifications and give full attention to them, that changes your brain and conditions what will be sent up next time. So the next time when you're thinking, I'd like to get a new suit. People wear suits anymore? I don't think so. I'd like to get a new gym outfit. I'd like to get a new piece of equipment for my home gym. Then into your mind, it's highly likely will pop, is it a luxury or is it a necessity? Now, that doesn't answer the question for you. You might even come in with, that sounds like a luxury, not a necessity. But then you said, my doctor said if I don't get more exercise, I could have a heart attack. I think this really, having it right here, I could use it while I'm watching TV. So it'll be more pleasant. I'm far more likely to do something that is essential for my health if I make this purchase. But the point is, having clearly identified the issue of luxury versus necessity, it's going to come up again. Whereas if you if the things that impress you are accidentally related, you're not going to have logical things occur to you. The moral is the structure of your brain is determined by whether you were in focus or out of focus when you recognize something or connected to things. The structure of your brain, and I mean neurons and axons and dendrites. Dendrites grow at night to synapse on axons, and we think that's how, learning and remembering occurs. It's not really settled yet, but some physical change goes on in the brain that enables you to remember anything. And we know the laws from introspection and testing ourselves of what gets remembered and what's not. The well-practiced gets remembered. The emotionally vibrant, emotionally charged gets remembered more than that which isn't, more than the bland. The more recent is easier to recall. So what you had for lunch today is a lot easier to recall than what you had for lunch on this date a year ago. So there's certain things we know. I mean, we know the dynamics of how things get stored. And according to whether your mind is purposeful, active, in focus, high level of awareness, the changes made in the brain will be different than if you're vegged out. And that means the next time you think, the content that comes up will be different. It will be logically related material, pregnant with important connections, because you filed it logically. The filing happens automatically. You can help it. The filing happens automatically when you get really clear on two things you consider important. The relationship between, oh, well, this causes that, or, oh, there's necessity and luxury. And that makes for a different brain structure than if it's a lot of rain today and I might get a big screen TV. Those are not logically connected. You decide to get a big screen TV and you have to drive through this tremendous downpour. You might remember that because it's emotionally vivid, but it's not, there's no logic to that. Size of TV, intensity of downpour, if any. So a person who's in focus, who's seeking to understand, who's seeking to make logical connections, will store logical connections, and that will make for different retrieved content. Moral, be in focus. Use your free will. Judge what comes up from the brain. That will cause different structure of what's stored in the brain. So what comes up next time is not directly under your control, but it is indirectly under your control. According to how you use your mind, you'll remember different things. And if you use your mind logically, rationally, purposefully, you will remember and store very helpful material, logically connected stuff, that when you next time ask a question, will make good, helpful material come out of your subconscious. So you see the whole, this is like the overview of how the conscious mind interacts with the subconscious. And it's not just, well, I say 2 times 4 is, and you hear 8 in your mind. That's like the atom of memory. It's not a simple passive reaction, stimulus response, and you're just sitting there as a viewer of what goes across your screen. You query the database, and you query the results of that query and the results of that query until you get to a place that you judge to be a stop. So what comes up gets identified and judged if you're in focus. And that means what is sent down for storage is logically related and material that's important to you. Like the connection between your TV's screen size and the amount of rain is not important to you. But the issue of luxury versus necessity is. All right, I'm going to stop here because we want to take question, and Dylan is helping out. And Dylan, you put in the chat. Yes, I see. So let's start at the top. SC is super chat. Thank you, Michael. How do you know, this is left over from the last one on determinism. How do you know psychopaths / serial killers have something physically damaged with their brains as opposed to early childhood nihilistic conclusion? You mean, how do you find out? Because I don't claim that. I mean, some have physical damage and some have psychological damage. But how would you find out? Well, if they die, you can dissect their brains. And if there's something gross, like a tumor growing on it, then you know something. I know a guy that was married to a friend of mine and became very irrational after the divorce. He was defrauding Medicare. He was hostile to his own children. He really out there, irrational. And they found he had a tumor on his brain. Eventually, we'll be sophisticated enough in our knowledge, advanced enough to be able to tell more subtle brain problems. Be aware, however, when we're not talking about tumors, but we're talking about subtle changes, bad mental states will do something to the brain. So you might see, oh, well, this brain center is all messed up. And it might be all messed up because of what went on in his conscious life. So I don't make a claim about who has what problem, physical or mental, but I'm saying they're both real. And the difference is, well, no, he wrote it correctly. He said, as opposed to early childhood conclusions, nihilistic conclusions. Yeah, but if somebody said as opposed to an abusive early childhood, that does not make you psychopathic. Being in a bad, abusive environment, I don't care how abusive you make it. If the guy grows up to be able to speak English or whatever language it is and put 2 and 2 together, he's not actually damaged to the extent where he can't do that. He has a choice to judge what's happening to him and to escape the bad, quote, conditioning. See, there again, you have, bad childhood environment, really bad childhood environment. Yeah, but what did he think about it? Did he think about it? Did he judge? What scientific evidence do you have that consciousness isn't physical? It's not a scientific question. What scientific evidence do you have that to the right of isn't physical? To the right of is a relationship, and it's a relationship that involves the speaker's point of view. It's not, hey, pick up some to the rights of at the hardware store, will you? And I need some to the rights of here. It's not physical. What evidence do you have that the plot of Atlas Shrugged is not physical? You don't get scientific evidence for that. If you know how to classify things, you know what, in general, between the mental and the physical, you know which they are. Now, be aware, in discussions of the mind and brain, people take physical as if they knew what it meant. And it's very much up for grabs. Is the gravitational field physical? Yeah, I guess so. How about light, electromagnetic waves? Are they physical? Well, they're changes in the electromagnetic field. What about the operation of natural selection? Is that physical? Well, I guess it's ultimately composed of physical things. It's not itself a physical thing. So the question of what is physical and what is not, beyond a kind of common sense use where you say, well, potatoes are physical, but my love for my mother is not. Beyond that level of obvious stuff, it gets hard to answer because physical hasn't been defined. Most educated people don't take introspection as a legitimate argument for anything. Exactly. And that proves my case. What did you say? I'm being a little, what's the word, where you go to the contrarian. But if most educated people don't believe something, there's a good chance it's true. Because the philosophy, most educated people have been exposed to Kantian philosophy and Popperian philosophy of science, and they have all the wrong methodology. Let's say at minimum, if I take out my contrarianism, the argument most educated people don't believe in X shows nothing except that that's commonly taught. Notice that it's self-refuting to reject introspection. If you reject introspection, you can't tell whether what you're thinking is logical or illogical. You can't tell whether you're deciding something is true because you like it or because you see the reasons why it's true. So this, I guess I'm going to turn it back on you. The fact that most educated people don't take introspection as a legitimate argument for anything is not a legitimate argument for anything. Now we're getting into some things further from free will. No, here's one. If leftist intellectuals are fundamentally Christian altruists, which I've said in other shows, how come they so strongly reject free will when it's a crucial part of Christian doctrine? That's a pretty good question. If leftist intellectuals, particularly Marxists, are fundamentally Christian altruists, how come they so strongly reject free will when it's a crucial part of Christian? It is absolutely not any part of Christian doctrine, first of all. Let's set the record straight on that. What is original sin? Is that a crucial part of Christian doctrine? I think so. What is predestination if you're not a Catholic and so maybe you don't believe in original sin? Predestination is determinism. There have been some Christians who have championed free will to some extent. But basically, God rules us. We are God's creatures. What did Augustine say? Help me to stop sinning. I can't do it on my own. God has to do it for me. What is grace? I am weak. Make me strong. I can't do it. I don't have free will. My urges are too strong. So it's not true that's part of Christian doctrine. Now let's look at it more intellectually. Leftist intellectuals have rejected the Christian metaphysics, but not the Christian ethics. That's the answer to it. To the extent that Christianity does uphold some non-deterministic element in man, which I think is very small, but to that extent, Marxists don't believe that. But if you're talking about, is it good to be rich and the poor have a responsibility to make themselves better off? No. They're with Jesus on that one. If you get to the question of, is it more important to help those in need or to live for your own success? Is there any question that Marxists are on the need side? Isn't the slogan of Marx, from each according to his ability, to each according to his need? So ability is a mortgage on you to pay for those who do not have ability. So leftism is Christianity, Christian ethics, not Christian metaphysics. In fact, you could make an argument that it is Christian metaphysics with the people, society, the proletariat, one of these abstractions, the forces of production, in the place of God. That was the kind of historical change. When God died, they invented the religion of altruism, of society, of collectivism, of the worship of need. We no longer worship a supreme being, we worship the most incompetent, the most vulnerable amongst us, is the way they like to put it. So you could make a case that even the basic view of reality still is in the Christian orbit, but basically they reject anything they associate with Christian supernaturalism. But they don't even dream of questioning Christian ethics. I don't know how much to run over here. Here's a different person, so let me take this question at least. Does altruism, now altruism, if those of you are not familiar with it, is the doctrine that you exist to serve other people. The needs of others are a claim on your life, and your moral worth is a function of how much you sacrifice your own desires and goals to serve the needs of others. Does altruism destroy an individual's motivation to live? Well, certainly living is sin for an altruist. Every mouthful of food you eat is taken away from somebody else on their view. What is life? Life is a process of value achievement, of getting food, water, shelter for yourself so that you don't die. All those things are evil, according to altruism. The principle of them is evil. If so, if it destroys motivation to live, if so, is this why so many people denounce free will? They feel guilty for their motivations. Yes, that is. That is one half of the reason. They feel unearned guilt for being alive, taking up space on the planet, exhaling carbon dioxide. And that's not altruism, it's environmentalism, but it's the same anti-self, pro-sacrifice morality. So if they can say, I couldn't help it, that gets them off the hook. The other half of the motivation is people have earned guilt that they want to escape. Did you know that criminals give huge amounts to charity? I read that in Stanton and Salmonell, The Criminal Personality. So it comes from actual, dare I say, scientists. And the last one here I'm going to take now. Oh, it's Dylan is reminding me at 10 p.m. UK time, which I think is 5 o'clock Eastern time, Method in Madness with the Aporia guys. Now, I think they pronounce it Aporia. And Ankar Gate. They're discussing systemic racism. That should be really interesting. The Aporia guys, to say something we're not supposed to say, are African American. Well, actually, Ankar is half Indian. So it's from people of color that you're going to hear this, and it's going to be, I assume, a defense of America against the charge of systemic racism, while admitting that there is racism in America. My own view, I don't want to say, what my own view is, because that might stop you from listening to what I expect to be a terrific session. What else do we have here on that? There's one more question, but it's so far removed. It's about space and time that I want to save it to a more appropriate question and answer session that we will have. But let's kind of tie this up. You don't directly choose your thoughts. You do not directly say, I am now going to think so-and-so. But you query your database, or you should. You have the power to query your database, and that gives you control over what comes up. What are some vegetables? Some green vegetables. Okay, if you accept that assignment, give it to yourself. The Queen Mary is not going to occur to you, but maybe cabbage, in my own case, green beans, broccoli, are going to come to mind because I set a purpose, instructing my brain, send me examples of green vegetables. You have the power to do that. You have the power to judge what comes up, not just to say, okay, that's it. For instance, are all those things qualified as vegetable? Is cabbage a vegetable, or is it something else? And how do I decide that? So it's always a further amount of questioning you can do, and you have to decide, okay, that's enough about this. I have enough now to fulfill my purpose. I'm going on to the next thing. So you see what I mean now, that how ludicrous and thin the determinist argument, as expressed very nicely by Harris, is. You don't choose your next thought, and yet what your thoughts are determine what you do. So you don't choose what you do. I mean, where was he when Ayn Rand wrote about the choice to think or not? I mean, he claims to be an intellectual. Can you be an intellectual and not know about at least some of this from objectivism? No. Maybe if you're from another country, but not an American intellectual. Okay, thank you very much for tuning in, and I will cede the spotlight now to the next very interesting YouTuber. See you next Monday at 3 p.m. Eastern, 8 p.m. UK time, GMT, I guess it is. Bye.